The cavernous auditorium fell deathly silent as the last strains of the band's finale died away. A hush spread through the rows of folding chairs, echoing off the high ceilings and polished hardwood floor. At the center of the stage sat a gleaming Steinway grand piano, its lid raised as if in invitation. Behind it stood Principal Hughes in his tailored charcoal suit, hair perfectly combed, a thin-lipped smile curling at the corners of his mouth. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice boomed through the speakers, "we have a special demonstration for you tonight. It seems one of our students, young Mr. Carter, has made quite the bold claims about his musical prowess. Since he is so confident, perhaps he would like to show us what he knows." A ripple of nervous laughter rolled through the audience. In the front row, a cluster of well-dressed parents nudged each other, cell phones poised to record what they expected to be an amusing spectacle. On cue, a pair of student aides stepped forward and gently beckoned to a tall, lean boy hovering near the back exit. Jordan Carter froze in place. He watched helplessly as his father, Malcolm Carter, the school's custodian, stood in the wings, shoulders squared with apprehension. Jordan's second-hand button-down felt stiff against his skin. His worn jeans seemed conspicuous in contrast to the sea of designer labels. The laughter rose again when Principal Hughes called his name. "Jordan Carter," Hughes said, voice dripping with ironic encouragement, "please grace us with a demonstration of your so-called talent." Jordan forced his legs to obey, each step heavy as he crossed the stage. He could feel the glare of dozens of eyes, some amused, some skeptical, burning into his back. His heart hammered so loudly he was certain each beat resonated through the microphone. He slid onto the piano bench, hands trembling as they hovered above the keys. Memories of late nights practicing in the empty music room surged through him, his mother's gentle voice echoing in his mind, coaxing him to lose himself in melody. He closed his eyes, took a trembling breath, and pressed the first note. A single crystalline tone rang out. The laughter cut off mid-snicker. Jordan's trembling fingers found the familiar opening of Debussy's Clair de Lune. The soft, impressionistic melody poured from the piano, weaving through the auditorium like moonlight drifting across still water. His body swayed with the music's ebb and flow, eyes still closed as each phrase emerged from deep within him. The delicate arpeggios sang of longing and loss, of quiet resilience. By the time he reached the piece's climactic high point, where the chord progression blossomed into a radiant cascade, the audience was utterly enthralled. Phones lowered, jaws dropped, whispers stilled. Principal Hughes stood rigid, his smug smile evaporated. When the final notes faded, Jordan opened his eyes to stunned silence. Then, almost simultaneously, applause erupted. Mrs. Sinclair, the kindly music teacher, was first to leap to her feet, tears glistening in her eyes. Soon the entire auditorium was standing, applauding, cheering. Jordan's father strode onto the stage, pride and disbelief warring across his face. "Hughes," Malcolm said, voice low but firm, "you owe my son an apology." Principal Hughes cleared his throat. "Well, that was certainly an unexpected performance," he said, attempting to regain composure. "But let us not forget, memorization does not equate to understanding. Mr. Carter, perhaps you would like to explain the harmonic structure of what you played before we draw any further conclusions?" A murmur of doubt rippled through the crowd. Jordan's cheeks burned as he imagined failure. But before he could hesitate, Mrs. Sinclair appeared at his side. "Go on, Mr. Carter," she said gently. "You deserve to be asked." Jordan inhaled deeply. "This movement uses a series of parallel chord structures that create an impressionistic wash, evoking the play of light and shadow," he began, voice wavering but growing steadier. Debussy often favored whole-tone scales and non-functional harmony to paint vivid sonic images. The arpeggiated figures in the left hand serve to anchor the piece while the right hand's melody floats above, suggesting the shimmering quality of moonlight on water. A hush followed. Principal Hughes's mouth hung open. A few parents exchanged embarrassed glances. Then Mrs. Sinclair prompted, "Would you care to play us something more challenging, Jordan?" Jordan shut his eyes again and shifted in his seat. This time he chose Chopin's Prelude in E minor, tapping into the raw, tormented emotion that had drawn him to the piece. His performance was not flawless, but each note carried honesty and power, as if he were channeling every hardship he had endured. The sting of classmates' taunts, the ache of his mother's absence, the weight of his family's sacrifice. As the final chord faded, murmurs of awe circulated. A distinguished woman in the third row dabbed at her eyes. Even Principal Hughes looked pale and shaken. Later that night, as Jordan sat in the empty practice room under the dim glow of the table lamp, the events replayed in his mind. He still felt the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He pressed his fingertips to the keys, letting them linger on fragments of the melodies he had played, as if to reassure himself it had all been real. Outside, the late evening corridor lights cast long shadows. Jordan remembered how, just 2 years earlier, his father had strapped him into his stroller and played nursery rhymes from an old vinyl record player, songs his wife had loved. After her passing, the recorder had gone silent, and music had become Jordan's private refuge, discovered through stolen hours in the library's computer lab and clandestine visits to the unlocked practice room. He smiled faintly, recalling the first time he had nailed a tricky listitude. The elation that had coursed through him was like warmth in his chest on the coldest day. Music had been his connection to his mother's memory, his affirmation that beauty could exist even when life seemed determined to crush it. For all his joy in playing, though, Jordan had kept his gift hidden. He was the custodian's son, someone existing on the fringes, noticed only when a mop was left out of place or a classroom needed dusting. His uniform of second-hand clothes and scuffed sneakers had never invited attention. In a school where wealth and pedigree were worn like badges of honor, he had been content to remain invisible. Now everything had changed. The following morning, the hallways of Westbridge High buzzed with excitement. Whiteboards in classrooms were hastily updated. Spring Art Showcase, sign up today. Flyers littered lockers, offering performance slots to students who met stringent criteria. 3 years of formal training, certificates of examination, letters of recommendation. The message was clear: only the well-heeled need apply. Jordan moved through the crowd, clutching his backpack straps. He had a meeting scheduled with Mrs. Sinclair after school, and his heart pounded at the thought of what lay ahead. What would Principal Hughes do in response to his unintended triumph? Would the showcase be open to accommodate him, or would he be punished for daring to shine? In history class, Mr. Ramirez discussed the Harlem Renaissance. "Who can name an influential musician of that era?" he asked. A few hands shot up. Duke Ellington, Ella Fitzgerald. But Jordan remained silent, recalling how he had once rattled off a list that fell on deaf ears. After his recital, though, he realized that knowledge paired with talent was a force no one could ignore. When the bell rang, Jordan slipped out of the classroom and found Mrs. Sinclair waiting by the music room door. Her silver hair was pinned back in a neat bun. Her sharp green eyes glimmered with excitement. "They're talking about you everywhere," she whispered. "Principal Hughes is furious, but the board members are calling to ask if we can suggest Jordan for a leadership role in the showcase." Jordan swallowed hard. "I don't know what to do, Mrs. Sinclair." She smiled and squeezed his arm. "You do. You keep playing. You keep sharing your gift. I'll handle the rest." As he headed to his locker, Jordan noticed something taped to the side. A crudely drawn caricature depicting a mop-wielding figure with musical notes swirling around his head, labeled Jordan the Janitor's Boy. Beneath it, someone had scrawled, "Stay in your lane." Jordan paused and stared at the crude mockery. He felt the familiar sting of humiliation, but this time it was tempered by something new: resolve. He reached into his locker, pulled out a fresh sheet of staff paper, and sketched a treble clef at the top. Underneath, he wrote a single word: begin. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, whispered rumors, barbed taunts, perhaps even threats to his place at Westbridge High. But Jordan knew this. He would not hide. His music, born from sorrow, sustained by passion, would speak for him when words failed. And no matter what obstacles Principal Hughes or anyone else threw in his path, Jordan Carter was determined to let his extraordinary talent shine, changing not only his own life, but the very heart of a school that had once tried to silence him. Jordan Carter awoke the next morning to the distant hum of traffic and the muted glow of streetlights creeping through his bedroom window. He lay still for a moment, replaying the previous night's performance in his mind. Debussy's gentle ripples, Chopin's anguished chords, and the stunned silence that gave way to thunderous applause. A soft knock sounded at the door. "Jordan? Time to get up, son," came his father's voice. Malcolm Carter stood in the doorway, his once crisp custodian's uniform replaced by a crisp white dress shirt and tie, an outfit he reserved for church on Sundays and occasions when dignity demanded it. He offered a tired but genuine smile. Jordan swung his legs over the edge of the bed, stretching sleep from his limbs. "Morning, Dad." Malcolm perched on the bed's corner. "I heard from Mrs. Sinclair. You were amazing last night." His tone held pride edged with concern. "But be prepared, not everyone was as impressed." Jordan nodded, tension knotting in his stomach. "I know. Section G of the hallway had more sneers than cheers." Malcolm's jaw tightened. "Bradley Williams is already circulating flyers denouncing your participation as unfair advantage. Principal Hughes, he hasn't responded publicly, but rumors say he's convening the board this afternoon." Jordan swallowed the lump in his throat. So this is just beginning. Their 40-minute drive to Westbridge High was silent save for the morning news playing softly on the car radio. Yet another local anchor breathlessly recounting the school's inadvertently viral recital. As they pulled into the lot, Jordan felt the familiar tingle of dread mingled with determination. Today he would confront the fallout head-on. Inside the main entrance, the walls were plastered with new posters. "Spring Art Showcase, auditions tomorrow." Underneath, a smaller sticker had been hastily added by an unknown hand. "Open to all, no exceptions." Jordan recognized the handwriting instantly, Mrs. Sinclair's looping script. It offered a sliver of hope, yet he braced himself for conflict. His first period was biology, which normally bored him to tears. Today, however, it bristled with energy. Neighbors whispered as he passed. Someone paused at his desk to whisper, "Break a leg at the board meeting." Jordan managed a tight smile, but felt his palms grow damp. The world had shrunk to a single question. Would Westbridge tolerate his presence once his talent had exposed their prejudice? At midday, Jordan made his way to the auditorium where the district board meeting had been scheduled. The lobby teemed with nervous students and anxious parents. School board members milled about, exchanging clipped remarks. Principal Hughes stood near the grand piano, arms folded. His tailored suit seemed more armor than attire. As Jordan approached, Mrs. Sinclair appeared beside him, cane tapping gently on the marble floor. "You don't have to be here," she whispered, voice low. "But it's good you are." Jordan swallowed hard. "What's going to happen?" She placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "They're debating whether to reinstate the audition process so they can exclude students without formal credentials, meaning you. But other members are pushing back, arguing that your performance proves talent matters more than certificates." Jordan forced himself to nod. He stepped forward as the board's doors swung open. Inside, the auditorium benches were lined with local press, district officials, and a sprinkling of supportive parents clutching small bouquets of wildflowers. Malcolm sat in the front row, face grave with concern. The meeting began with routine agenda items, budgets, facility upgrades, before shifting focus to the Carter case. Principal Hughes rose to speak, voice calm but his eyes betraying agitation. "Colleagues, our policies regarding eligibility for the Spring Art Showcase exist for good reason. They ensure that every performer meets established standards of formal training, maintaining the event's reputation. Yesterday's piano demonstration, while impressive, does not negate the need for a clear, equitable framework." A murmur of agreement rose from some members. Bradley Williams's father, Thomas Williams, leaned forward, hands clasped. But before they could proceed, a board member stood, Dr. Evelyn Grant, the district's equity officer. "With all due respect, Principal Hughes," she said, voice measured, "the policies you reference were implemented without consideration of socioeconomic barriers that prevent students like Jordan from accessing formal instruction. If we value true artistic excellence, we must recognize it when it appears, regardless of pedigree." Polite applause followed. Principal Hughes's lips pressed into a thin line. Jordan gripped Mrs. Sinclair's hand, surprised at his own racing pulse. One by one, voices joined Dr. Grant's. Parents who insisted art was about expression, not diplomas. Teachers who recalled gifted students sidelined by bureaucracy. Even the student representative arguing that art was meant to break boundaries. Finally, Thomas Williams, a wealthy donor to the district, cleared his throat. I've seen Jordan's performance. I admit it was extraordinary. The rules shouldn't be broken lightly, but sometimes rules must bend for real talent. I propose that Jordan be granted a special audition exemption, provided he and his father sign a statement acknowledging district guidelines moving forward. Principal Hughes's posture tightened. He opened his mouth only to be cut off by another board member, a soft-spoken gentleman named Mr. Patel, whose son had benefited from a music scholarship years before. If we force the Jimmy Carter family to choose between their dignity and the showcase, we betray our own mission to serve all students. I move we admit Jordan unconditionally and direct the administration to review policies that discriminate against talented students who cannot afford formal lessons. A hushed excitement rippled through the room. Jordan felt tears prick his eyes. The motion carried by a narrow vote. Dr. Grant rapped her gavel decisively. Motion passed. Jordan Carter will be eligible to perform in the Spring Arts Showcase. Administration is directed to develop more inclusive criteria for next year. Outside the boardroom, reporters swarmed Malcolm and Jordan. Malcolm answered questions with quiet dignity. My son's gift speaks for itself. We're grateful for the board's decision. Jordan offered a polite wave, heart pounding like a drumbeat. Word of their victory spread through the halls like wildfire. In seventh period, a senior football player turned to Jordan mid-lecture. Hey, congrats, man. That took guts. Jordan managed a genuine smile. But the day's emotional high came with a price. As Jordan prepared to leave for his after-school lesson, he found a crumpled envelope tucked into his locker. Inside was a single typed line. Your time here is running out. Enjoy it while you can. No signature, no return address. A chill crept over him. After school, Jordan headed for the library to meet Mrs. Sinclair. The corridor lights glowed dimly, and the silence pressed around him like a heavy blanket. He spotted her waiting beside the piano room door. Lock intact, but she held the key. You're safe here, she said, slipping the lock and opening the door. Inside, the familiar scent of polished wood enveloped him. He exhaled. As he took his seat at the piano bench, Mrs. Sinclair closed the door and set her cane aside. I'm arranging for you to have scheduled practice times, she explained, leaning over the music stand. I spoke with the superintendent. You'll have this room twice a week until the showcase. Jordan bowed his head in gratitude. Thank you, Mrs. Sinclair. I appreciate everything you're doing. She smiled, eyes bright. Talent like yours needs guidance. Tonight, let's work on your original composition. He nodded, unfolding the sheet music of his fledgling piece. As his fingers danced over the keys, weaving the gospel-infused motifs with classical counterpoint, he felt a steady calm. Yet outside the sanctuary of the music room, the world remained unpredictable. 2 days later, Jordan and his father attended a meeting of the Parent-Teacher Arts Committee. Malcolm entered the brightly lit art classroom, greeted by a scattering of concerned parents and teachers. At the center sat a long table, where Principal Hughes and Dr. Grant presided. Hughes and I co-chair this committee, Dr. Grant announced, with a mission to ensure the arts programs serve all students equitably. The board's directive compels us to revise eligibility policies. She gestured to Principal Hughes. He cleared his throat. Our intention is to create a tiered system, a masterclass showcase requiring formal credentials, and a community showcase open to all. Murmurs rippled through the room. Parents exchanged glances. A few shook their heads. A local artist volunteered to mentor students who lacked formal training. A retired music teacher from the community offered to run free weekend workshops. Malcolm listened, pride in his son's name rubbed raw by bureaucracy, yet heartened by genuine offers of help. When the meeting adjourned, he and Jordan lingered. Remember, he said quietly, they're trying to cage your talent with categories. We won't let them. Jordan nodded, resolve warming his chest. That weekend, Jordan arrived at the community center's New Saturday workshop, an initiative born from the committee's meeting. The room hummed with energy, drums in one corner, violins in another, a sight unfamiliar to many of the students who only associated Westbridge arts with exclusivity. The retired music teacher, Mrs. Alvarez, led a group through ear training exercises, while the local artist, Mr. Brooks, demonstrated improvisational techniques. Jordan slipped into a seat at the grand piano, where Mrs. Sinclair already waited. She nodded and sat at the teacher's piano beside his. Over the next 2 hours, they dissected his original composition, refining transitions, balancing dynamics, and deepening its emotional impact. Jordan felt his confidence bloom under her guidance. As he packed up to leave, Mrs. Alvarez approached. "Young man, I heard about your boardroom performance. I've never applauded so loudly in my life." She handed him a small, worn booklet. "These are my Oliver Messiaen transcriptions. Challenging, but worthwhile. If you have the courage to tackle them, they'll take your technique to the next level." Jordan accepted the gift with gratitude. "Thank you, ma'am. I'll do my best." Monday morning brought an unexpected surprise. Jordan found a printed flyer taped beside the showcase announcement in the main hallway. "Celebrate Talent, Westbridge Community Concert," featuring Jordan Carter and friends. Friday, 7 p.m., Westbridge Community Hall. His breath caught. Community members, Mrs. Alvarez, Mr. Brooks, and other volunteer teachers had organized a complimentary concert to spotlight the students who lacked the masterclass credentials. Jordan's cheeks warmed. The organizers had welcomed him not just into school-sanctioned events, but into a broader world that celebrated passion over pedigree. At lunch, he and Malcolm visited the art room, where they found parents and teachers drafting invitations. Principal Hughes had not been informed, intentionally. Some argued the school board might view the concert as a challenge. Others insisted it was a necessary statement. Malcolm placed a hand on Jordan's shoulder. "Whatever happens, know that your music has already broken barriers. Friday will be another milestone." Jordan nodded, determination stealing his features. That afternoon, Jordan's classmates, once indifferent or hostile, began treating him differently. Zoe Chen, the quiet violinist who had risked her own standing to offer her family piano, slid onto the bench beside him during a free block period. "Messiaen?" she asked, nodding at the booklet. "Your next challenge?" Jordan chuckled. "I'm terrified." She grinned. "Good. Fear means you're stretching." She tapped her violin case. "I'll help with intonation." Across the room, Bradley Williams lingered by the door, fists clenched, jaw set. Jordan met his gaze and offered the smallest nod of acknowledgement. Bradley's face flickered with conflicting emotions. Anger, embarrassment, perhaps grudging respect, before he stalked away. Jordan let his shoulders relax. He had faced down ridicule once. Now he would face it again, with allies and community ready to uphold him. That Friday evening, as dusk settled over Westbridge, Jordan and his father arrived at the community hall, a modest but warmly lit space festooned with paper lanterns and ribbons of sheet music. Rows of folding chairs filled with supportive faces, retired teachers, neighborhood families, even a few Westbridge students who had opted out of the school showcase to stand with him. Mrs. Sinclair, leaning on her cane, greeted them at the entrance. "Welcome," she said, voice bright. "Tonight belongs to you." Jordan's heart swelled. He found his name printed in bold on the program cover. Jordan Carter, Original Composition Premiere. As the opening act, a youth choir from the local church, concluded, the hall's lights dimmed. A spotlight illuminated Jordan at the piano. He glanced at his father, whose eyes were moist with pride, then settled on the keys. He began softly, weaving the haunting gospel melody that had anchored his piece. The notes rose, trembling with vulnerability, then strengthened into a confident proclamation of resilience. As his original theme unfolded, a melding of classical structure, jazz inflection, and spiritual fervor. Jordan poured every ounce of his journey into the performance. By the time he reached the soaring final passage, the hall was silent, every listener transfixed. His last chord resonated like a triumphant battle cry. Then, reenacting the moment from his first recital, applause erupted, echoing off the walls and lifting his spirit higher than any defeat could ever drag him down. When the ovation finally subsided, Jordan stood and bowed, tears pooling in his vision. He glanced at his father, who clapped fiercely, and at Mrs. Sinclair, who nodded with tears brimming in her eyes. As he left the stage, the hall filled with cheers, Jordan realized that his music had found not just an audience, but a community. They had created a space where talent could flourish beyond the boundaries of privilege, a testament to dignity, perseverance, and the transformative power of art. And somewhere, he hoped, Principal Hughes and the board were listening, because Jordan Carter had proven that no policy, prejudice, or closed door could ever silence a soul determined to be heard. The days leading up to the Spring Arts Showcase crackled with anticipation. At Westbridge High, gilded posters announcing the masterclass and community showcases hung side by side, a visible reminder of the tensions that still simmered beneath the surface. Jordan Carter moved through the halls with purpose, his footsteps echoing against lockers slick with the morning rush. Gone was the boy who shrank in the corner. He carried himself with a quiet confidence born of hard-won victories. Morning of the showcase, Jordan arrived early, slipping into the auditorium before any students. He paused at the threshold, studying the stage where his name would soon be announced. The grand piano, once vandalized, now stood gleaming under fresh lights, every string replaced, its lacquer new. A brass plaque at its side read, "In Memory of Harmony," a subtle tribute to the community's collective effort to heal what hatred had broken. Jordan's throat tightened. This instrument had become the symbol of his journey, from secrecy to spotlight, from humiliation to triumph. Mrs. Sinclair emerged from backstage, cane resting in her hand, but her frame tall with pride. "You ready?" she asked, voice soft. He nodded, swallowing hard against the swirl of nerves. "More than ever." Behind the curtains, former rivals, students who had once mocked him, now offered nods of respect. Zoe Chen slipped him a reassuring grin. Bradley Williams lingered at the edge, gaze averted. Jordan caught a glimpse of something in Bradley's expression, regret perhaps, or recognition, and he felt a surge of compassion rather than triumph. Parallel showcases at 7 p.m. sharp, the two showcases began, the school's masterclass performance in the main auditorium and the community concert across town at the Harmony Center. Jordan moved seamlessly between them. His community concert, powerful as ever, drew an overflow crowd who cheered every note. Cameras flashed, local reporters beamed, and students from Westbridge filled the aisles in solidarity. Moments after his concluding bow at the community hall, Jordan excused himself and climbed into his father's idling car. Malcolm drove at a steady pace through familiar streets, the city lights guiding their way. "You were sublime," Mrs. Sinclair said from the passenger seat, tears of joy glinting in her eyes. "You gave them your whole heart." Jordan exhaled, relief and elation mingling in his chest. "Thank you for everything." He glanced at his father, whose eyes shimmered with pride. But beyond the glow of success lay unfinished business. Principal Hughes had agreed to meet Jordan and Malcolm at the school after the school showcase concluded. The confrontation that had once been designed to humiliate now offered a chance for genuine reckoning. Facing the principal, Jordan returned to Westbridge High at 9:15 p.m. The school was nearly empty. The hush of corridors felt charged with possibility. Mrs. Sinclair led Jordan and Malcolm into Principal Hughes's office, its walls lined with trophies and framed photographs of past showcases. Hughes sat behind his polished desk, posture rigid. His tailored suit looked weary under the overhead light. He rose as they entered. His face was pale. The night's events had clearly taken their toll. "Mr. Carter, Jordan," he began, voice unsteady. "I owe you an apology." Jordan exchanged a glance with his father, heart fluttering. "I tried to protect the school's traditions," Hughes continued, running a hand through his hair. "I feared that opening the showcase to students without formal credentials would dilute its prestige. I was wrong." Malcolm's eyes softened. "We all make mistakes," he said quietly. Hughes nodded, swallowing. "I authorized the investigation into your residency. I conspired, unconsciously perhaps, to uphold barriers that had no place here. I see now that I was defending privilege, not excellence." He paused, voice cracking. "I'm resigning effective immediately. I can't lead Westbridge after what I've done." Jordan felt a mixture of sorrow and relief. The man who had once symbolized his obstacles was finally stepping aside. "Thank you," he said, voice steady. "It takes courage to admit you were wrong." Hughes offered a hollow smile. "You deserve that applause you got tonight." Institutional change. In the days that followed, the district superintendent delivered a public statement. Westbridge High would permanently eliminate restrictive prerequisites for its Spring Arts Showcase. A new policy, co-authored by Dr. Grant and community representatives emphasize talent and passion above pedigree. Student art organizations merge with local arts groups to create mentorship programs. Free community workshops, funded by the philanthropy sparked by Jordan's story, open their doors to any student who wished to learn. Even Bradley Williams issued a statement. I was wrong to judge Jordan without knowing him. His talent and dignity have taught me a lesson I won't forget. Though some students balked at his apology, many accepted it as a first step toward healing. A bright new stage. 6 months later, Jordan sat at another grand piano, this one housed in the Performing Arts Wing newly constructed at Westbridge High, made possible by the district's reinvestment in the arts. He prepared to perform his composition, Silenced Voices, for the first time on campus. The auditorium was filled with classmates, teachers, and community members, an audience more diverse than Jordan had ever seen in that space. He closed his eyes, picturing his mother's face, his father's supportive smile, Mrs. Sinclair's gentle encouragement, the warmth of the community that had rallied behind him. His fingers touched the keys and the music soared. Finale, a call to courage. As the final chord resonated, the audience leapt to its feet. Jordan opened his eyes to a wave of applause, tears glistening on many faces. Principal Hughes watched from the front row, head bowed in respect. Bradley Williams offered a fist bump that Jordan accepted with a nod. On stage, Jordan lifted his hand in acknowledgement, voice trembling as he spoke into the microphone. This journey taught me that true excellence transcends background, skin color, or bank account. My gift was always mine. No institution could grant it, and no prejudice could take it away. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been told you don't belong, you do. Your voice, your talent, your story matters. Stand firm in your dignity and let your music, your art, your truth speak when the world tries to silence you. Tears flowed freely as the curtain fell. Jordan stepped into the lobby, where his father wrapped him in a fierce hug. Mrs. Sinclair and Dr. Grant rushed to congratulate him alongside Zoe, Lucas, Amara, and a crowd of supporters who formed a circle of love around him. Epilogue, beyond the stage months later, Jordan stood backstage at Carnegie Hall, violinists tuning their strings and stagehands adjusting lights. He had been invited to premiere his composition with a youth orchestra. As he stepped into the spotlight, he thought back to that first moment on Westbridge's stage, when laughter threatened to drown out his voice, and smiled. He raised his bow, took a breath, and began, a refracted melody of resilience, love, and righteous anger against injustice. In that moment, every note carried the power to uplift, to unite, and to compel audiences everywhere to remember. No child's talent should ever be buried by prejudice, and no institution's tradition should stand in the way of a gifted soul seeking to be heard. Jordan Carter's story was no longer just his own. It had become a movement, a testament to the triumph of dignity over discrimination, and a shining example of how one voice, when given the chance, can change the world.